Good evening, Primary 6. This is where you find me. It's a kind of rest area in a service station on the side of the road, and I'm very, very lucky to be here. I wasn't sure where I was going to finish the day today, and I didn't really feel like being in the tent. So I found this place, and you can see it's got this tatami mat, which is a typical Japanese mat, and the areas for sleeping often have this tatami on the floor. Okay, right, well, I've got your questions here to answer, so I will answer them, and thank you very much for them. I'll try and be as quick as I can. Okay, so question number one, is there radiation in Japan? Is it dangerous? Well, I think that you can probably answer this question as easily as I can, and actually it is a question that I've got to think about, because after I leave the area of Tohoku, I want to go to Tokyo, and usually the most direct way to go to Tokyo from here would be to go past Fukushima, and I'm wondering whether I'm going to do that or not. If I don't do that, it means I've got to go a long way around. Anyway, yes, there is radiation. Apparently the levels are falling at the moment. It's difficult to know with the Japanese government. They're not always so informative about telling people. But yes, but that's something, like I say, you can also find out about that. What has been your most interesting experience in Japan? I think maybe the most interesting experience so far that I've had was when I met and was hosted by father and daughter in Sapporo, which is in Hokkaido, the first island that I came to. The father was 67 years old and was confined to a wheelchair, and that's the first time I've ever had an experience like that before, where I've been spending a lot of time with somebody in that kind of condition. And it was amazing to see what spirit and life the man had in him. I think he was also quite pleased to see me, because when he was in his 20s, he cycled from Denmark to Rome. So I think that I brought back some memories for him. So that's been my most interesting experience, but it's a very personal one. I guess another interesting experience, but a bit frightening, was to spend the other night in a typhoon, but I'll talk about that with another question. And it's this one. How many typhoons have you suffered? Well, I've suffered 2 typhoons. The first one was typhoon number 12, which broke my tent just 4 days after I'd started cycling, and it really slowed me down. The wind, right from the beginning of my trip, the typhoon was approaching and the wind was terrible, and although I'd done some training before starting, I wasn't really so ready, and really the wind didn't help. I got to a place called Shosambetsu and pitched my tent on a cliff top, which maybe wasn't a good idea, and during the night the wind was so strong that it snapped one of the supposedly indestructible poles, but it wasn't, and the tent fell on top of my face, and I had to make a dash for the toilets that you all have heard about. The second typhoon was the other night, and that one was, I think that was even worse, but I wasn't in my tent. I decided to take the tent down, and I moved to the nearby disabled toilet, which was reasonably okay, but the wind and the rain was just terrible, and I didn't sleep at all that night. What's my favorite Japanese food? Can you tell us the recipe? I'm not very good at saying recipes for things. I'm also not an expert on Japanese food. I'll try to give you more information on Japanese food as we go. I appreciate that you'd like to know, so hopefully I'll get some more ideas, or maybe I'll talk to some Japanese people and video their answers. I like unagi, which is eel. I like sushi, which is the typical, very famous in the West, rice with usually raw fish. And I like sashimi, which is raw fish. It's very, very nice. How do you communicate with other people? That's a good question. Some people speak a bit of English. A lot of people understand English. Usually if you ask them if they speak English, they'll say no, 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 no. Their education system is not very good with teaching the children to speak. They learn how to write and they learn how to read, but they're not given very much practice in speaking. So when it comes to meeting somebody and talking, they're very, very shy. So I usually manage. I mean, I said before, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. If somebody wants to talk to you, then you find a way. And if you, and sometimes it's funny because they talk to me and I don't know a single word of what they're saying, but I can understand perfectly what they're saying to me. I manage. I know enough words of Japanese to help me on my route. It's a shame because I'd like to be able to stop and talk to people seriously about things that I'm thinking or things that I see. I will be able to do that through some interpreters when I get to the organizations, but I am a bit limited. But I manage. Could you prepare a video focused on basic Japanese words and sentences? Yes, I will do that, but I'm not an expert in Japanese. I mean, it would help me if I did. I can do that, but frankly, I think you can do that just as well yourselves in the classroom. But I'll try to do something. Are the Japanese friendly? The Japanese are very reserved people. They're very private people. They're also very collective. I mean, they work very much as the group. I think that I read somewhere that they decided in something like the 16th century, they realized that they really needed to work together and not fight each other. So they became very, very cooperative with each other, but they're also quite a private people. Earlier today, I decided to take a shower in the disabled toilet, and I made a mess of the floor, and I spent 20 minutes mopping up the floor. And a lot of Japanese came in during that period, and not one of them said a word to me. They're very much like that. They sort of let you get on. They don't want to, they either through privacy or through embarrassment or whatever, they tend to just kind of blank you. And if you're a foreigner, sometimes they can be very, very shy. Some Japanese, not very many, a few are a bit anti-foreigner, but not, in general, that's not the reason. In general, they're quite shy. Of course, I've met lots and lots of Japanese that have been very, very friendly. Today I was cycling up the hill and a woman stopped me and invited me into her house, which was next to her little shop. And she gave me a lot of chestnuts to eat, and she gave me some tea, and she invited me into her home. And I've had lots of examples of friendliness like that. I think friendliness is like everywhere else. Some people are friendly, some people aren't. How are you charging your batteries and devices after moving from the public toilets? Now that's a good question, and one that I wonder about quite a lot. Here there's plugs all over the place, and I've got everything charged up. Usually if I'm in a campsite, there's going to be a toilet nearby, and usually that toilet is going to have somewhere to charge. I believe also you can charge in the convenience stores. There are actually places where you can pay 100 yen and plug in your device and charge it as well. So I think in Japan it's not really a problem. So far anyway, it hasn't been a problem. What's the most interesting cultural habit or experience that I've seen? Well, I lived in Japan before. I think I'll leave that question and talk about that question in a separate video. How far have you travelled already? I've travelled, I think, about 550 kilometres, not as far as I wanted to travel. Can you show us the interior of a Japanese house? Again, I hope that I'll be able to do this in a separate video. I can't just knock on a door and say, hello, I want to see your house. I need to know the person. So I will bear that in mind for later. Have you seen any wild animals? I saw a beautiful eagle today, which perched in 2 trees very, very close to me. And the other day I saw a fox that came trotting along the road just as I was going into a tunnel, and then it stopped and looked at me and spent a long time looking at me and didn't run away and just carried on looking at me. Those are the only 2 wild animals that I've seen. Do you know how many people live in Japan? Well, you can check this on the internet yourself, so I'm not going to answer that question. You tell me. Do you ever get tired of, aren't you tired of cycling? I'm not so strong, and after about 4 days I do tend to get I need a bit of a break. Hopefully as time goes by I'll need it less. There are times when I hate the bicycle. I mean, today I had a lot of uphill, and I would happily have got on a train or a plane or a helicopter or anything. But in general, it's very satisfying, and the pace of seeing the country on a bicycle is very different from travelling in a car. You're much more a part of the scenery that you're passing by, and of course you pass it slowly, so you have a chance to see it coming, to go past it, and you've got plenty of time to view. So I enjoy it. I've always enjoyed cycling, so, but yes, I do get very tired. Do you like the weather? Well, not at the moment. At the moment, since I've arrived, I've had like 4 days of sun, and most of the rest of the time it's been wind and rain and not very nice. Typhoon season is due to end fairly soon, so I hope that the weather will get better. I thought autumn would be a good time. Are there any signs of reconstruction? Well, I'm not in the main area of the tsunami yet. So I have seen some signs of reconstruction, but I still haven't hit the main area. I think there is a lot of reconstruction going on. The organisations that I'm supporting are working on a different level. They're working much more on smaller scale projects with older people and smaller communities. It's a different thing. What type of bike have you got? It's a very ordinary hybrid bike, mostly road bike. I bought it in Malaysia, and I bought it for about £200, which I suppose about 230 euros. So it's actually a very cheap bike, and it's quite heavy. It's not a super fantastic, light as a feather, wonderful bike, unfortunately, but it's okay. Do Japanese play soccer? I mean football in the streets? That's an interesting question. I have never seen Japanese play football in the streets, and I have seen them play in parks, but they don't play so much football as they play. Football's reasonably popular here, but they play a lot of baseball here. Remember that the Americans were here during the war, or just at the end of the war and after the war, and they brought with them quite a lot of cultural influence, and one of the influences is baseball. Japanese now play baseball. Okay, well, this is a lot longer video than I wanted it to be, even though I tried to rush. Thank you again for your questions, and I hope to hear from you again soon. Bye-bye.